Hello, everyone, and welcome to this first webinar about the digital innovation, digital ecosystem management. We will organize similar webinars every 3 weeks till the 1st of July. I'm Wim Vanhaverbeke and your moderator for today. So why are we organizing these webinars? Digital technologies are transforming virtually all industries to the extent that we even don't talk anymore about automotive or healthcare industry, but we call it nowadays mobility ecosystems and health ecosystems. The number of applications of digital technologies is increasing exponentially, but what we also experience that the adoption is slow in many industries, including, for instance, agriculture, healthcare, energy, and mobility. People and organizations don't welcome digital solutions for very, very good reasons. And then the question is, how do we develop management and how do we develop and manage ecosystems to facilitate the adoption of those digital applications? Today, I have the pleasure to introduce to you two excellent speakers. The first one is Sergio Levy from Phillips and David Zenner from Elia. And Elia is the TSO, or the Transition System Operator in the Belgian energy market. The speakers will give a presentation of about 20 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. And you are invited to participate in the Q&A by writing down your questions in the Zoom Q&A box. So let's start. Our first presenter is Sergio Levy. He is Vice President and Head of the Strategic Alliances at Phillips. Today, he will talk about how digitalization is reshaping Phillips and the innovation in the company. I had an interesting interview with Sergio a while ago, where he shared his view on the impact of digitalization in healthcare. It's a perfect topic for this webinar series. Sergio, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Wim, and delighted to be part of this event. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I will share my screen if you give me a moment.
Perfect. We see it.
All right. So as Wim introduced, today we will talk about digitization and innovation with a particular focus on healthcare. And we will do so in the context of a global company like Philips, which I think will bring quite of a unique perspective, as the company has gone through 130 years of doing business through multiple waves of technology, innovation, and economic cycle. And each time this has led to transformations, and the company led many of the changes, and today's digital revolution will certainly be no exception. The company was founded by the Phillips brothers on the basis of technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and expanded very rapidly beyond its initial market in lighting, and became actually one of the largest industrial conglomerates in the world. But the challenges, and I would say also opportunities that have emerged from the digital transformation of society as a whole, have really taken the company into a new phase of the corporate journey. And the company decided to pivot away from the diversified conglomerate model and to focus uniquely on becoming a health tech company. And today we will talk about this journey and how the changing nature of innovation has influenced it. And we will start with some words of advice from Bill Gates, who reminds us that although we tend to overestimate the change that happens over the next 2 years, we are likely to underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. And he warned us not to be lulled into inaction. And effectively, inaction has a steep price to be paid, particularly in digital. Many of you may have perhaps seen some of these statistics, but close to 90% of the companies that were in the Fortune 500 list in 1955 are no longer in the list. They either went bankrupt or acquired via M&A. Half of the companies that are today in the Standard & Poor index, they're expected to be replaced over the next 10 years. The average age of a company in the S&P index is down from 60 years in the 50s to 20 today. And if you want to take it from just a market cap standpoint, the most valuable companies in the world, the vast majority are now digital technology companies. So I guess the question is, well, why is this happening? And is it just about technology? And I would argue that digitization is not just about technology, but is also about the evolving customer mindset, how we as customers have evolved by interacting with digital tools. I think you may have heard the quote that we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. And I found this definition of Forrester to be quite interesting, describing the current customer mindset as the expectation that any desired information or service is available on any appropriate device, in context, and at your moment of need. And I think if business is here to serve customers, then this is the mindset that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, this new customer mindset has really made organizations like Forrester to announce the end of the product area and the start of the age of the customer. The product-centric business model is what we are all quite familiar with. Companies focus on technology and products. They then develop multiple channels through which they address as many customers as possible. And that's a model that has worked very well for decades. But the possibilities of digital are today creating a new business model around the customer and the so-called customer-centric model. Now here the customer is at the center, but he may not be interested in procuring a product. He may be interested in a ride, not necessarily in buying a car. He may be interested in listening to music, but not necessarily buying a record. Customer now expect an experience, expects to discover solutions and services through these experiences, and wants to consume it through a variety of channels, anytime, anywhere, and in context. So as we think about digitization, this tension between the customer-centric business model and the product-centric model is something to keep in mind. But perhaps nowhere more than in healthcare, we experience this gap between the customer-centric business model and the product-centric business model. I mean, here we are really nowhere near anytime, anywhere, and in context. And some of you have had perhaps direct experience of healthcare systems where it's really fragmented experiences with data silos that limit coordination and patient-centric care. Sure, the customer is here is at the center, but these organizations around hardly ever communicate together, and oftentimes it is the patient who is acting as the glue among all these organizations. And healthcare isn't it different? I mean, there are intrinsic challenges to the industry. Again, fragmented nature of the healthcare systems themselves. There isn't a single platform that holds all the data that you need to take care of patients. Even the electronic medical record holds less than 40% of the data that you really need. Again, information silos and low levels of interoperability, a very, very strict regulatory environment with a lot of concerns around data privacy, including also a complex industry structure. Decision-making in healthcare is probably an order of magnitude more complex than in most other industries. Reimbursement also needs to be taken into place, as well as a level of preparedness for some of the changes to an existing system. So many intrinsic reasons for which it's been a challenge to adopt technology into healthcare. But the cost to society for this are extremely high. If you just take a large healthcare market like the United States, it is estimated about a quarter of the total spending is actually associated with some form of waste, either with administrative complexity, failure of care coordination, over or under treatment, many reasons that make it that a lot of the spend, and you can see the size of the numbers, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that are not made to most productive use. And that cost also spills over to the clinicians. These are the people that are supposed to take care of us. We did a survey around 500 young doctors under 40 across several countries. And some of the results are quite staggering. 3/4 say that they regularly experience work-related stress, again, due to overwork, complexity. 1/3 has even considered leaving the profession as a result of work-related stress. Now, the good news is that technology seems to be the way out of this situation. 80% believe that the right technologies could reduce their workload and allow them effectively to be doctors again, as opposed to stuck doing a lot of administration. And even 30% mentioned data portability as a driver for workplace satisfaction. But again, as you can see from the figures on the right, when dealing with patient data, there is still quite a few restrictions that make it that some of these things are more of a challenge to get adopted into the clinical environment. There are, however, powerful trends shaping the industry. And I think as health systems are being asked to do more with less, we can expect changes in the near future. There's an expectation that healthcare should be more patient-centric. Consumers increasingly want to engage in health, and they want to be part of the decision. So this means that also, devices and other data needs to be integrated into the clinical workflow. There's an expectation that healthcare should be more value-based and less linked to the fee-for-service model that is actually the one that is prevalent all over the world. And here again, a shift towards prevention and new reimbursement models will be required. There's also an expectation that healthcare should be more networked, and we've seen that with COVID. There is great capability to do and take care of people also from their own home, as opposed to having only people in hospitals. And again, this shift is possible, and we've seen it realized through virtualized care and telehealth. And there is an expectation also that this should be more data-driven, with the clinician having all the data available at the point of care. And here, many efforts will have to be made around interoperability and integration of AI. So how is Phillips reacting in this changing world? I mean, we hear all these technological terms, cloud, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, but really what we need to do is answer these complex questions that come from our customers. How do they leverage information across different care settings? How do they manage care more efficiently and improve outcomes? How do we deal with the fact that we have an increasingly aging population with chronic conditions? And that has required a transformation toward the customer-centric model. And here I've pointed out 4 domains where corporate transformation was necessary. The first, and we'll talk about it in some more details, is the shift away from being a diversified conglomerate to a focused player on health tech. And then a shift away from selling standalone products and more focusing around customer-centric solutions. It is also not possible in this environment to work with traditional channels and a transaction more oriented business model where you're effectively transferring assets to your customer. There is more and more an emphasis on partnerships, ecosystems, business models that give a premium to outcomes and success and building longer term relationships. Now, to cover some of these points, we'll start with the shift from being a diversified conglomerate to a focus on health tech. And for this, I'll have to take you into a brief journey into Philips' history of innovation. And the company's heritage really started with incandescent lights. In order to compete globally and to manufacture these lights at scale, the company needed to manage and master certain technologies, such as glass making, creating vacuum, inserting a filament, adding a connector. So very much technology-driven innovation. Then somebody figured out that some of these vacuum tubes could be used as switches, and the world of electronic computing started. And you can see from the picture here, well, pretty much the same technologies applies. Glass making, creating vacuum, inserting a connector. So Philips became a diversified conglomerate because it could leverage a common technology base across multiple products. Once you master the key technologies for vacuum electronics, well, you can enter lighting and radios and TVs. And then once that transistor became a silicon transistors, well, you enter the semiconductor space and you could start to be into the market of displays and optical storage and medical systems. So technology-driven innovation really led to diversification. If you take a Philips radio in the late 60s, well, most of the components you see in the picture there were made by Philips. You fast forward to 2004, much cleaner system there, but here again, most of the components also made by Philips. But something has radically changed. And I wanted to illustrate the pathway of the digital revolution by looking at how digital cameras have evolved. Of course, everything started with mechanization. And then with digitization, we witnessed the disappearance of film. But things didn't stop there. Once the function was digitized, then we've seen an entire system, which is the camera, effectively be integrated and migrated into another system, the cell phone. And again, things continue to accelerate with the internet, where a whole ecosystem of integrated digital solutions and services started to spring up around digital photography. But most of these players didn't have to know anything about photography, and yet created much more value than those that mastered the technology. So the pathway of the digital revolution can really be summarized with an analog function that then becomes digitized. Once it's digitized, genie's out of the bottle, things accelerate. Multiple functions start to be integrated, an entire system is integrated, and then systems of systems get integrated together to create ecosystems of digital propositions. Now, the rise of digital ecosystems is profoundly transformative, and it's a real change of how innovation is done. In the product-centric business model, technology-driven innovation leads to diversification. You make big upfront investments in your technology, and you try to get a return on investment by entering into as many spaces as possible. But in the customer-centric business model, the focus is on the experience of the customer. And there, what we're trying to do is integrate multiple functions and even go beyond a single company's portfolio to create an ecosystem to maximize the value of the experience. And you're constantly using data to adjust and tweak that proposition that you're. Now, healthcare clearly lags other sectors in the customer-centric model. If you look at where we can be today with healthcare devices, most, whether it's a patient monitor or an MR scanner, are data generating and they process information. Connectivity was added, so you now have IP address and you're able to exchange data. And we've also reached the level of building smart system where AI is integrated. But the next big step is really going to be into creating systems of systems, and the ability to interoperate more between systems. And then finally, build open systems where ecosystems are possible and different players can collaborate on top and next to each other. And again, I've underlined there the fact that multiple vendors need to work together. That's the only way these ecosystems actually work. You have to go beyond your own portfolio to provide an integrated experience to the customer. Now, the move from a product-centric organization to a customer-centric organization led to the abandonment of the conglomerate model and to a focus on a single customer experience around health tech. And so many of the products that in the past you may have known Phillips for, displays, television, audio, has all been spun off or sold. And today the company is entirely focused on healthcare and health systems. Also, the nature of our innovation has fundamentally changed. If you look at how we measure innovation, we use the quadruple aim as the parameter. We measure, for example, have we improved the patient experience? Have we improved the patient outcome? Have we improved staff satisfaction? We've seen the issue with burnout. So we cannot layer solutions on top of clinicians that create more work. And have we increased productivity and lowered cost of care? So certainly, how we measure ourselves and how we measure our innovation is also a sign of how things have changed. Innovation is also a business model. If you look at the traditional sales of more product-oriented transactions, you have capital investments, but again, it's an asset transfer model, effectively. What you've seen is more and more an evolution towards subscription-based, usage-based models, with ultimately objective being a results-based payment, where there is a risk sharing and the reward is made on the outcome and the value that was generated. And of course, to enter into these kind of business models, you cannot do this alone. Solutions need to be co-created with customers and based on open systems. And for this, you cannot work in the traditional form of channel of the product-oriented business model, but start to build more around partnerships and ecosystems. You need to understand the entire experience end to end. And for that, again, you have to go beyond your own portfolio. You need to give stakeholders a voice. If you're measuring KPIs based on customer outcomes and how they perceive your solution, they need to be part of the decision making. We need to leverage data. We're constantly adjusting and tweaking the solution by using data. Today's marketing departments at Phillips are staffed with data scientists. Again, the power of data determines the kind of solution that you're going to design. And again, these are going to be co-created and implemented and transformed with. So in conclusion, Phillips has transformed itself into a leader in health tech, but it had to do so to meet the challenges of digitization and the challenges of a customer-centric business model and the changing nature of innovation. We've taken digital technologies, the new customer mindset, and the power of ecosystem to really reorganize the customer, the company, in a different way, and focus again on solutions, outcomes and relationships, and partnership and equity. I personally believe that there has never been a more exciting time to work in healthcare. There are still many obstacles that prevent the sector to take the full benefits of digitization, but COVID has actually shown that when needed, the sector is able to respond very quickly and deliver extraordinary results. And sometimes you actually need a crisis to trigger innovation and change. So I'm very optimistic, actually, on the kind of patient-centric care that we all aspire to, and that is potentially within reach. So thank you very much for listening.